Well, as those of us who live here under the giant red eye in Mordor can tell you very, very clearly, it's kudos season again here in Hollywood. Hail Sauron. The elites are busy putting on their designer clothes and attending elaborate ceremonies where they congratulate each other over and over and over again for making another year's worth of liberal propaganda. Now, we realize that the award shows like the Oscars and the Emmys often deliberately overlook conservative-themed films, shows, and actors, so we decided to put together this special 5-part series called Red State, Red Carpet to honor the contributions our side of the political aisle have brought to Hollywood. The series will culminate with our very own award show we call the Ronnies. Guess who it's named after? You won't want to miss that part. But in this first episode, we're going to examine the role conservatives have played in cinema, or as we like to say, movies, and how important entertainment can be in the culture. And so let's talk about Hollywood and how it became so liberal. So, who makes up our veritable Academy of Conservative Arts and Sciences? Well, joining me right now is an Oscar-nominated screenwriter, co-founder of PJ Media, and celebrated author Roger L. Simon. And next to him is fellow screenwriter and best-selling author, my co-host on The Klavan and Whittle Show, Andrew Klavan, host of the PJTV series Zone Nation and member of the band 20 Pound Sledge, my friend Alfonso Rachel, and the director of one of the most popular political documentaries of all time and famed conservative academic, our friend Dinesh D'Souza. Welcome, all of you. Glad to have all of you here. Zoe, let's start with you. Why do you think it's so important that conservatives don't just abandon the fight and get active in the cultural landscape?
Well, I would say we're very much part of the culture. The problem is, in the culture, we play the butt of the joke.
Yeah, that's right.
And the thing is if you don't engage the culture, I hear it all the time, man. It's like, we should just ignore this stuff, and who cares what these celebrities think, and so on and so forth. The problem is, if you're not representing yourself in the culture, they're going to misrepresent you. So we're up against a legion of prejudice that's waged against us, from radio to TV to movies, academia, and so on and so forth. So if we're not there creatively competing in the culture, well, we're just going to get stepped on by the culture.
Yeah, a lot of conservatives think of the culture as a battlefield in the political war, but it's not. It is the planet of how much all the other battles are fought. You can't get out of your own culture. It's like trying to take the Greeks out of Greek mythology. You just can't do it.
Right.
So, Andrew, how do you think it's possible? I mean, we talk about these ideas and trying to make conservatism cool and stuff, but really, it's kind of backwards, isn't it? Because it really is kind of cool. I remember when I was first reading, P.J. O'Rourke, it's like, we're the ones who believe in loud guns and hot women and fast cars, and they're the people who think you have to wear a safety helmet in the shower. So why is it that this perspective is so turned around, and what can we do about it?
Well, it's turned around because they've turned it around. I mean, recently, Chris Rock said he no longer could play college campuses because they were too conservative, by which he meant they were too leftist. He meant that they got insulted at whatever he said, and everything that he said was a cause for offense and protest and all that. That ain't us. That ain't us. We've been laughing at everything. We even laugh at ourselves. So, I mean, it really is not a question of us getting cooler. It's us taking back the conversation a little bit. What's really interesting, what is really interesting is that as long as the left doesn't realize that their values are being challenged, they buy into our way of looking at things completely, because our way of looking at things is true. When the first Dark Knight film came out, and I pointed out in the Wall Street Journal that it was about President Bush, I guess that was the second in the Dark Knight trilogy, they went nuts. What a fool, what an idiot. Now, of course, they know that what was obviously true was true. Now they admit it because they've seen the rest of the trilogy. But the same thing is true of Toy Story 3, an immensely conservative film. When they see those values, they think those are their values. I mean, I'm talking about the rank and file. I'm not talking about the Bill Ayers of it all. But I mean, the rank and file think that those are their values. They don't realize that those values have been pulled out from under them like a tablecloth and leaving that idea of liberalism still standing. They think they're the liberals. They think the left is the liberal. They're not. We are.
One of the problems, I think, with conservative movies just in general is that because they're not made by the studio system, some of them, and I mean this without any defamatory intent whatsoever, but many conservative products look like they're made by churches. They look like films that are made by churches in Iowa, and the special effects and the acting and all of the general production quality is not generally up to Hollywood standards. But Dinesh, I'd love to bring you into it because your movies have used big budget special effects and editing to make them look like any mainstream documentary. I thought 2016 had the best graphics package, had the best production values of any documentary I've ever seen, ever. So do you think that conservatives often forget that they need, maybe not flashy elements, just production gloss to demonstrate that they are at least equal to liberal films in terms of our ability to present a message?
Yeah, I would agree that I think that the problem is not merely that the production quality tends not to be that good, but also that a lot of conservatives, and this is even true of Christians, they go into movies to do messaging. They go into movies to make a movie exposing, say, Obamacare, or they go into, and so they look at the film as a kind of a celluloid version of writing a memo. And they don't realize that most people don't go to films for that reason. People go to films for entertainment. And so as a result, the conservative films wear their conservatism on their sleeve. I'm making a conservative film, I'm making a Christian film, as opposed to I'm making a film, and just as Oliver Stone has a message, I have a point of view. So I think part of it is not only getting the production values to be good, but getting away from this idea that you're just doing explicit messaging. Rather, what we're doing is entertainment with a message.
Well, Roger, let's go to you for a second here, because you've been in Hollywood and seen Hollywood go from the kind of conservative message of Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne to the message of Matt Damon and Michael Moore and so on. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the procedure in terms of how it actually happened. Seems to me that when films like Easy Rider came along, and the first kind of anti-hero, the first kind of anti-American movies, they were really fresh and different. We were making Paint Your Wagon and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, and these things came along like, my God, look at this. I've never seen anything like that before.
Well, yeah, that's true. And that's the kind of the boomer principle, of the boomer generation is to blame, as they are for a lot of things. And it's very true, but I think it goes back earlier. And there's an interesting book by Ron Radosh that everybody should read who's interested in this subject, called Red Star Over Hollywood. And it talks about the days of the blacklist, which in Hollywood lore, the blacklist was this terrible thing when all these people were misrepresented as communists. And actually, if you read the book that Radosh wrote, was based on a lot of memoirs of the period, they were communists. And so there was a whole group of people that had come here and were using it for propaganda purposes and succeeded to some degree. Now, others didn't. There are a lot of different strains. I mean, a lot of people say Hollywood is one thing, which is absurd. It's not. I mean, everybody on this stage at the moment has a piece of Hollywood. Dinesh has a piece of Hollywood. Clint Eastwood has a piece of Hollywood, and so forth. But the prevailing wind is what we know it is. And that prevailing wind started with a really strong leftist screenwriter base,
Right.
with some cooperation from some executives, and then went on into that era of Easy Rider and the rest of us pot-smoking, Moses wine-writing guys like me. And so I'm part of the problem, but I switched around so they hate me. But I think it's those two strains coming together that did it.
I think there's also something else. You know, when the studio system collapsed, and it didn't just collapse, it was brought down by the government anti-monopoly laws, so it was actually an engineered collapse. The businessmen lost control of the operation. Hollywood, creative people have always been liberal, not leftist, but liberal. But when you had it run by businessmen, you at least had the impulse, the motivation to appeal to the rank and file, to appeal to America.
And I'm going to stay right here and fight for this lost cause, even if this room gets filled with lies like these. And the Taylors and all their armies come marching into this place. Somebody will listen to me.
These guys, the guys who started Hollywood, mostly loved America. They mostly come from other places, and they knew what that was like. And so it wasn't offensive to them to make a film in which Bing Crosby played a lovable priest. They didn't feel that they were talking down to people. They felt that they were doing business, the business of entertainment. Once it became in control of the artists, and once the profit was separated directly from the number of people who sat themselves down in the theater, as it is separated today, that was when it kind of lost control of. It lost the reason to be in touch with reality and to be in touch with the people.
That's a very good point. Let me add one thing on it. What happened then when the studio system broke up is independent financial entities moved in to make the movies. Most of these were on the left. And that's why it shaped it too. And one of the things that, looking at Dinesh is doing now, looking to find conservative business people, because conservative business people, they stayed away from the arts, and they shouldn't have, because that more than anything is what has created the situation now, because they're not backing Zoe Rachel.
Right.
I mean, that's what it is.
Our friend Jeremy Boring really put that most clearly. He said, once you severed the connection between the studio and the theaters, the domestic theaters, you were no longer making movies for Americans to go to and see and enjoy in their own theaters. The money might come from China, might come from Oman, might come from wherever. And if it bombs in the theaters, what do they care? It's not their money anymore. It's not the studio's money. It's coming from someplace else. But I think maybe the question we should be asking ourselves is, what do we do about getting this ground back? I mean, Zoe, we have one big advantage going for us now, and that is for at least the last 5 years, the state, the man, the government has been Barack Obama and the giant socialist agenda. And we're seeing a lot of movies now, especially skewed to young people, where this kind of all-powerful government and individual people rebelling against them. It's a very conservative idea. Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner, all of these things are basically teenage people fighting against this sort of faceless giant thing out there. I think that works really well for us.
Well, it's become fashionable to be compassionate, but forced compassion. If you don't stand for that, then you're just evil. You're just evil and mean. But if we're getting down to how we can take this back, it's doable. We thought a certain way, and now we're thinking a new and fresh way, which actually is old-fashioned ideas, but they work, right? They help to maintain a society. So it's doable. It's going to take time. It's going to take patience. It's going to take diligence, but it's doable.
Dinesh, maybe I could ask you about this because. I've talked to many people personally. I'm not just buttering you up here. I'm just telling you just the actual facts. I've had many people come out of Obama 2016 and just said, I didn't know that about the guy, and it's changed my mind. So in addition to not only kind of maintaining sort of the cultural presence in terms of nonfiction movies, wouldn't you agree that there's just so much about the left that's just not talked about, whether you talk about it in documentaries or you fictionalize it? They've got an awful lot of dusty chambers with a lot of skeletons in them, and you pointed out some of them in 2016 to change people's minds.
The best thing for me in 2016 was the fact that the media, the mainline media, was not doing its job. When I was in Indonesia, down in Kenya, I was at the Obama family homestead. I was interviewing his brother, and I would ask people down there, who's been down here? CNN, Time Magazine, the New York Times, and they were like, no, none of them have been down here. You're the first guy to show up. So I realized here's a big story, the kind of black hole surrounding Obama of information, and no one was covering it. So for me, both with my books and the movies, I feel like there's a lot of unoccupied territory, and that offers great opportunity for our side.
Well, what about that, though? I mean, Dinesh, you're really on target there, right? The fact is that no one is talking about these things, and no one is down there shining a light. The thing about 2016 that I thought was the most powerful thing about your movie was you basically let Barack Obama tell the story. You weren't making allegations or accusations about Barack Obama in his past. You took readings from his book. It's his words. And that is extremely powerful when you go there. So do you think that this once again kind of reflects the fact that if we had a news media, we wouldn't be in this kind of trouble? Because as you say, there are no reporters going where you're going.
Yeah, I think on our side there's a little too much punditry, and there are not enough people doing real journalism. In other words, uncovering facts and letting the facts speak for themselves. I think that's in a way the most powerful form of persuasion. The Greeks understood this. You tell people what's going on, and you put it in a kind of narrative framework, and that's what persuades people. I think the second fact is that the left is much better than us in using the free market to its benefit. You look at guys like Jon Stewart, Bill Maher, Michael Moore. They are all surviving in the free market. The free market has made Michael Moore into a multimillionaire. On our side, we're often looking for handouts. We're looking for nonprofit organizations to subsidize us. I think we need to go out in the market ourselves and show that there is a market for these ideas, and we got to convince investors to bet on us. And the way we do that is we convince them that the culture war is very important, and that they need to put some of their money into defending the free market system that makes their success possible.
I think we should add to this, though, that one of the things that conservatives never notice is we're winning. The culture has turned. The difference between where we started, when I started yelling about this maybe 7, 8 years ago, there were no conservative voices, open conservative voices in the culture. That's not true anymore. And I think that Dinesh is absolutely right for the conservatives to start coming out of their think tanks and getting into the scrum and mixing it up in the world of profit that we supposedly believe in. I think is the right thing to do, because I think we're winning on the basis of pure ideas. People are seeing a libertarian generation is coming up. They're seeing what oppressive government looks like. It's our moment.
Here's something I'd like to discuss with all of you guys, and I've been given this, this is basically all I've been thinking about for the last several months. Our side is afraid to use emotion, and we're afraid to use emotion, I think, because we know that the left uses nothing but emotion to lie to people, and therefore we recoil from emotion like it's a hot stove. And I had the most remarkable experience. I was flying back from Florida a few months ago, and I fly Virgin America whenever I can because I love that airline. And one of the reasons I love that airline is they've got a safety video. And their safety video is about 4.5 minutes long, and it's about a $2 million musical number, and it is. I get on the plane, I watched it on the plane, I was flying back, I'd seen it 10 times. Got off the plane in LA, went home, fed the cats, put on the headphones, watched it again on YouTube. 11 million people have watched that safety video, and I'm probably responsible for 30,000 of them because I can't get enough of it. But here's the point I'm trying to make. This production values of this safety video with dancers and music and rhyme and especially really excellent music covers not only the most boring information on planet Earth, namely here's how you operate a seatbelt, but it covers the most boring information on planet Earth, and I've heard this information 300 times sitting in a commercial jet. So my feeling is, if you want to explain George Washington to the American people, the whole idea of George Washington, I would put him on a stage like this, a giant open set, and I'd have a guy standing there with the powdered wig and the tri-cornered hat, and I'd have him in the waistcoat and everything, holding a musket. And I'd say, this is what George Washington looks like you is 250 years ago, but that's not what George Washington looked like to the people who knew George Washington. Then I'd have 3 of the hottest dancers on earth come up to this guy, rip his costume off in a breakaway costume, and I'd have a 6'5", 35-year-old buff man standing there in boxer shorts saying, this is what George Washington would look like today. And they'd put him in a $900 Hermes shirt, and they put him in a $20,000 Armani suit. They'd give him $2,000 shoes, put some mousse in his hair, muff him up a little bit, give him some bedhead, toss him an AR-15, have him rack it, turn on the laser designator, because George Washington was a swinging, deadly dude. And when you take these values and you use things like dancing and music, people can make conservatism interesting. Some people can make conservatism funny, but if you can make conservatism sexy, I'm telling you the game is over. And the idea that people won't even think about it, won't even go there, Zoe, right? I mean, seriously, it's over for them.
Mm-hmm. You know what the conservatives have to fight against? The word.
The
word conservative. Because ever since we were little kids, conservative meant old, fuddy-duddy, stodgy, and actually, yeah. So the reality of that, of course, is not true, but it's unfortunate that's there.
So how do you do it?
The problem is, though, is that no matter what word we try to label ourselves as, the liberals are going to take that too and give it some sort of stigma.
But I don't think we should worry about that at all. I mean, I just think we should try to outthink them. I think we just present our case. I think what we need is more fearlessness, more emotion. You know, there's a difference between sentiment and sentimentality, more honest sentiment, and more cool. And I think we can.
And entertainment.
Yeah, and entertainment.
Let me just close with you, Dinesh. One of the most moving moments in your movie was, as you said just a moment ago, when you went and interviewed Barack Obama's brother, and you made a human connection with him, and it wasn't about statistics, and it wasn't a PowerPoint presentation about Barack Obama's economic policies. It was a direct connection with his brother and the abandonment, and how and that was so much more effective at showing what kind of a person this was, really, than any list of all of his policy nightmares and aberrations. Do you have anything you want to add finally before we close this episode on the power of emotion in terms of showing people rather than telling people?
See, I think that movies traffic in the language of emotion. If you distinguish between a novel, a play, and a film, a novel by and or a nonfiction work, a written work that you read in a book, appeals to the mind. And most of the action occurs in your head, in your brain. When you see a play, most of it occurs on the ear because you're listening, and the stage is limited. So there are going to be a few sets, but by and large, it's the spoken word that's coming through your ear. Now, with a movie, it's what you see and what you feel. And I think ultimately that's the great persuader. So a movie that fails in emotion is a failed movie. Now, a movie that has emotion can also pack a lot of intellectual punch and get away with it. But movies must succeed in the language of emotion.
I think the one thing that the left understands about movies that we refuse to understand, those of us that make movies understand it, but as a political movement, it's completely lost on us. And this is the idea of the willing suspension of disbelief. This is a common term for us. We know all about it. Most conservative people out there have never heard the expression before. But the willing suspension of disbelief is the idea that you could go to a movie theater on a Saturday afternoon. I think Jeremy, our friend Jeremy pointed this out. Go to a movie theater in Sherman Oaks on an afternoon, have a big old tub of popcorn. You're sitting next to your girl. There's 300 people, air-conditioned comfort. You know, it's broad daylight outside. Meanwhile, up on the screen, you're down in the basement. A vampire jumps out of the darkness, and people leap out of their seats. And nobody believes that they're actual vampires. Nobody believes they're in a basement. Nobody believes it's dark. Nobody believes in any of these things. But because we drop our reason and because we drop our critical facilities and put ourselves into the story, anything that comes in through that screen goes into our brain. And when I would talk to people in live audiences, I would say, if I start a sentence and you would finish it for me, you'd have some idea about how emotional control I have over you. And I would say, so I'll start some sentences and you finish them. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird. And everybody will go, it's a plane, it's Superman. And I said, the fact that you can finish that sentence means that the Superman slogan went into your brain, but so did all the values of Superman, Superman as America, the idea of a decent, omni-powerful presence who's only inhibited by his own decency. That's in your head with Superman too. And people don't understand the power of lowering your intellectual guard and having these movies speak directly to your brainstem.
And if I can offer a corollary to that thought, which seems to contradict it, but really doesn't, the same guy who suspends disbelief sitting in the theater becomes really smart in the darkness of that theater. A guy who ordinarily may not be able to put two and two together, nevertheless can figure out a whodunit, is very intuitive about character and personality, can spot things on the screen that are only alluded to rather than directly said. So actually that gives us, in trying to make a film, the ability to really assume that the guy who's sitting in the seat may not know a whole lot, but is also really brilliant.
That's an excellent point. I think it was, who wrote Story? Is it McKay? Or a guy who wrote about Story about screenwriting pointed out that a writer can sit for a year and write a mystery, and audience members are so heightened in their perception, they'll go, but I'll bet it's actually the mother-in-law. You know, there's something a little funny about the way that thing's going. That's going to do it for the first part of our special series, but you won't want to miss the rest of the episodes as we discuss patriotic and faith-based films, as well as hold our very own award show. You can find the whole series at the members section or at the PJ store. You can always find Andrew Klavan alongside me on Klavan and Whittle, and you can read Roger L. Simon's articles at PJ Media. Don't forget to watch Zoe's shows here on PJTV and give his band a listen. And of course, please go as often as you can to DineshD'Souza.com for all things Dineshable, which we are very, very fond of indeed here at PJTV. I'm Bill Whittle for PJTV. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.